So I want to go over, okay, how to memorize, okay, these values. So there's 18 of them without having to go through all 18 basically. And so I briefly mentioned some of the techniques already a while ago before we went on a break. And so I told you that the instead of all 18 values, you really just need to memorize these six. Right? So the cosine and sine are the only ones you really have to memorize. Okay, so why is that? Well, because you can use your identities to find the other ones. So namely, once you know these, then secant and cosecant are simply the reciprocals. So just flip whatever you have memorized to find secant and cosecant. Then how do you find tangent and cotangent? Well, to do tangent and cotangent, you're gonna do sine theta over cosine theta. Okay, and so now, which means now what we're gonna do is go over on how to memorize sort of the cosine values and the sine values. And so there are different ways to do this, right? So one of them is obviously just forcing yourself to memorize all the values. Okay. The other thing is some students will actually just recreate the table. So just creating these again as you um, sort of have them memorized, and then you can recreate the rest of them if you choose to do so. But so for now, I'm going to show you a few ways to actually help you memorize the value. So again, our focus for now is just cosine and sine. So if you look at cosine and sine, the one thing they all have in common is everything is over 2. Okay, so you look at it, it's radical 3 over 2, radical 2 over 2, and then 1 over 2. So everything is over 2. So if you sort of disregard that part and just know, oh, everything's over 2, then that means I just need to memorize what goes on top. And if you look at what goes on top, this is a radical 3, a radical 2, and 1 is really just radical 1. So it's radical 1 is just 1. And so these are just all radicals. They just go in order. This is 3, 2, 1. And if you look at the sign, it just goes in the other direction. Radical 1, radical 2, radical 3. Okay. And so that is sort of one way to memorize your values for sine and cosine. Okay. Any questions on that? So everything's just a radical, and then everything's over 2, and then they just sort of start from 3, 2, 1, and then 1, 2, 3, and then you can get your values and recreate your table yourself. Okay. Questions on that? Okay. All right, now you're gonna say, well, there's nothing special about that, right? So I mean, I could have just memorized that thing and um, sort of go over that and just recreate the table. So what exactly are you doing different than that's not on your textbook, right? So what exactly am I doing different that is not covered in my textbook? So the white paper is really just for background, okay? And so I'm gonna show you how to use your hand to actually get the 5 values, or sorry, the 6 values for your 30, your 45, and your 60-degree angles. I'm using my left hand, so this is my left hand. And so basically our focus is only the 3 middle fingers. So the 3 middle fingers corresponds to each one of your angles. And so so the ring finger is your 30-degree angle because it's the smallest one of the 3 angles. The middle finger is your 45-degree angle. And then your pointy finger or your index finger is your 60-degree um, degree angle. Okay. And so now, if you're looking for a particular trig function, so namely sine and cosine, so cosine of an angle, so let's say I want to find cosine 30. Okay. So what you're gonna do is fold your 30-degree finger. So you're gonna fold your ring finger. And so the top number, right? So from here to here, so the number of fingers above the folded finger are the cosine value. The number of fingers below the folded finger are the sine value. So if I fold the 30-degree angle, how many fingers are above? So just count how many fingers are above the folded finger. So there are three. So 3 would be the number inside the radical, because remember, everything's a radical, and then everything is over 2, and there is your cosine 30. It's radical 3 over 2. If you want sine 30, so sine is below the folded finger. So how many fingers are below the folded one? So how many fingers are below the folded one? So there's only one finger. So it's going to be radical 1, which is just 1. And then everything's over 2. And so it's going to be 1/2. Questions? Let's try a different one. Okay. So let's try 45. So 45 is my middle finger. So sine 45. So how many fingers are below? So how many fingers are below? So this would be 2. So it's radical 2, right? The number of fingers. And then always over 2, right? And so it's root 2 over 2. And if you check your table of values, sine 45 is root 2 over 2. Okay. Questions on that? So there's really no need to memorize, right? So you're not memorizing anymore, right? You're just it hurts. You're just using your fingers, okay, to do so. Let me move this a little bit further here, and let me move this. It still hurts. Ah. Okay. Does everyone get it? Right. So the number of fingers tells you the number that goes inside the radical, and then it's always over 2. So if you're doing 60, so what is cosine 60? You're going to fold the 60-degree angle, which is your index finger. And then cosine is the one above the folded finger. So how many fingers are above the folded finger? There's only one. So it's going to be radical 1, which is 1. And then it's always over 2. So the answer is 1/2. Okay. And so that is how you work things out using your fingers to do sine, cosine, and for your 30, 45, and your 60. Okay. Questions on that? Questions on it? So now, how do you do secant and cosecant? Well, instead of the radical over 2, then you're going to do 2 over the radical. Okay, so if I now want to do, okay, let's say secant of 30 degrees. Okay, so 30 degrees, I'm going to fold this one. And then secant is cosine. So cosine again is the one above. And so I have 3 fingers. So it's radical 3. But instead of radical 3 over 2, you're going to say 2 over radical 3, which is 2 rad 3 over 3. Okay. Any questions on that? Recording. So that is how you do sine and cosine, and then essentially secant and cosecant. Now, the nice thing of what I showed you is it actually works for tangent and cotangent as well. Okay. And so let's say I want to find a tangent of 30 degrees. Okay. And so let me go ahead and put my fingers on here again. And let me go ahead and write the angles on my fingers themselves. So this is 30, right? This is 45, and this is 60. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and fold my 30-degree angle, which is this one. And so if I leave it like now, where my palm is actually up, this part is cosine, right? And then this part is sine. And so remember, tangent is sine theta over cosine theta. So right now, the cosine is the one above, the sine is the one below. And so I want to flip that over so that I have sine theta over cosine theta. So I have to flip it. And if I flip it, notice that I have one finger and three fingers. And so it's 1 over radical 3, which is rad 3 over 3. So that is tangent of 30. So you don't even need to memorize it. It's actually on your hand as well. Just keep in mind that when you're doing tangent and cotangent, you don't need the over 2 because the over 2 will just cancel. So just simply grab the fingers, both sides, to get your sine and your cosine. So how do I do cotangent? 45 degrees. So if I fold this one, right, so 45, if I fold the middle finger, so this is cosine and this is sine. And tangent is cosine over sine. So right now I have radical 2 over radical 2, which comes out to be 1. And if you check your table, radical 2 over radical 2 is going to give you 1 for your table for cotangent 45. Okay. Any questions on that? Any questions on it?